This is the Nike Phantom GX2 and the Lunar 2, which is basically the same boot but with a high collar. And technically they just take the first generations of the GX and Lunar and they just merge them into one grip knit cyclone monster of a boot, on paper at least. But actually there are also some quite significant changes going on under the hood. So in today's video, I'll tell you what the GX2 does well and also not so well, to hopefully help you decide if you should buy a pair or not. Because as always, I'm JayMike and this is my review of the GX2 and Lunar 2. So what's happened on the GX2 is that Nike have continued using the grip knit upper from the GX1, but then added the 3D ribs that we know from the Lunar one. And they've changed it to a single piece, one layer upper. That means that you have a very similar mixture of these individually coated yarns that are a bit sticky, and then also the darker high tenacity yarns that are uncoated to give you this perfect balance of grip and not being overly sticky. And just like you'd expect, it is still really soft. It might not be because of that rib texture on the upper, especially around this area, not as 10 out of 10 mind-bendingly soft as the first GX, but it's really close, and once you get it on your foot, I had a hard time really telling a big difference because it just immediately takes to the shape of your foot almost like asking any questions, it's just there, and it's a really effortless boot to just put on and feel right at home in, because it's super comfortable. And just like the GX1, it has this almost like it's a slightly structured, almost stretchiness to the material, where it really feels like the upper just takes the shape of your foot very loyally. It was one of the things I enjoyed the most about the GX1, and thankfully that sensation is still intact on the GX2 and now also on the Lunar 2, which is nice. But for me, the biggest change in the fit comes from Nike going from a 2-layer construction with the grip knit overlapping the fly knit to this new 1-layer construction. That means that you just get a slightly less snug fit in the GX2 that's just, I can call it a bit more loose, but it's not exactly baggy or lazy or anything. It just feels a little less tight than the GX1 and maybe perhaps just a bit more free because there's less layers to put pressure on your foot and make the fit really tight. Now, personally, I love that combination of a rather snug but really soft and pleasant fit in the GX1. But if you're a player that enjoys the slightly more unrestricted and free sensation, then the GX2 will do a very good job. And I also reckon that these will be perhaps even more welcoming for people with wider feet than the GX1s. So that's a really good thing. However, I also found that when you bend your foot, there seems to be a little bit more material bunching up in the GX2, which also means that it won't be in contact with your foot. So there's less material around your foot to fixate it in place, meaning that the lockdown feels ever so slightly more relaxed. It's definitely still there, but it's not as insisting. Let's put it that way. Now, the fit as a whole is largely similar to that in the GX1. You get slightly more room in the toe box because of the tooling, but otherwise you get that same really nice shape to the boot with a wideish forefoot, slightly sculpted midfoot, and then a rather deep heel that allows your foot to really settle in nicely. And it's something I just enjoyed a lot. It feels really good, although I could have done with a bit more pressure around this point here to fixate it in place. But overall, it's a really good shape, very comfortable from the get-go, and it just fits. Now, obviously you don't have ghost laces anymore, so it's just, good riddance. The collar here on the GX2 is ever so slightly higher than on the GX1 for whatever reason. And then of course you have the Lunar 2, which is basically the same as the GX2, just with the collar from the Lunar 1. So basically now the Lunar 2 is to the GX2 what the Superfly is to the Vapor. Same boot, just with a collar. And frankly, I think this whole naming structure is kind of stupid because the Lunar used to be something entirely different and, by the way, made for women, and now it's just the GX2 with a collar. It's just unnecessarily confusing, Nike, but just it is what it is. Now, as for the sizing here, I went through the size, which seemed like the right fit for me. It is on the wider side, which is very accommodating, and also maybe runs a quarter of a size long for me, so I have a little bit of room in the forefoot, but for me, true to size is the answer to get a good fit. But if you remember the Phantom Luna 1, the ribs were a little, rigid. Is that still the case?
Not really, no, actually. At least not in a Phantom Luna 1-like way. But what it does offer is the slightly more obvious, almost amplification of the grip knit stickiness, meaning that it feels like you have a few more tools in order to manipulate the ball. And I wouldn't say that it's a really natural feel because of obviously all the stickiness, but it has a really refined feeling to it where you get the texture, you get the feeling of manipulating the ball, but without it adding too much bulk to the upper either. And obviously it still has this very wax-like, almost spiderwebby stickiness to it that gives me confidence when I'm on the ball and allows me to, look up and focus on whatever's going on around me. And the Lord knows that I need as much of that as I can get. But what I actually like the most about the GX2 upper is that Nike have toned down the stickiness when you play on dry surfaces like an artificial grass pitch here, meaning that it's not as crazy grippy as the GX1. And with the amount of times that my foot has gotten stuck on the ball, leading to me almost falling over in the first gen, that was a very welcome change. And I can feel that right away. It just feels as if the stickiness is now a bit more controlled. And the monster has been tamed on AG. And I'm vibing with it.
And then there is the Cyclone 360 outsole, which was made to improve multi-directional traction while reducing those little twists that your knee makes when you plant your foot to prevent injuries.
It was probably my favorite new feature of the Phantom Luna, and while I realize that it might not be for everyone, I do particularly enjoy this relatively responsive feeling of pushing off and changing direction with the 5 circular studs here under the forefoot. And given the plate is also on the stiffer side, it will split opinion, but I do like the feeling of a more potent forefoot in the Cyclone tooling here. But it might also be that you're gonna miss the FG outsole from the original GX, which I get, it was a very solid tooling. But the good thing is that Nike have actually carried over the AG Pro outsole, which is not the same, but it feels relatively similar. And also the good thing is that you actually get a lower, more pointed toe box than in the Cyclone FG version. Plus, the AG version is definitely also the smoother ride out of the two, which, by the way, also leads me to 4 annoying things that you need to know about. The first thing is that I got some stud pressure from these 2 bad boys, which was actually kind of evident throughout my entire testing period. And while it's not exactly a big deal breaker, it was annoying. Oh, and the midfoot of the Cyclone tooling, just like it was on the Phantom Luna 1, is very soft and flexible. And in my book, it just doesn't feel as if I get that stable, supportive, stiff base that really supports my movement. And I would have preferred that. And then there's this material right here, which just bunches up a bit into this ball of excess material when you wear it. And not only does it irritate my eyes, but it just looks and feels a little unnecessarily sloppy. And it was fine on the GX1, so why change it and mess it up? And finally, there is the lockdown in the heel, which, as I explained earlier, I would have liked to be a little bit firmer. But especially if you have a narrow foot like mine, there just seems to be a bit of like a loose fit on the inside of the heel that just allows you to have a bit of dead space where I can actually put my finger all the way down the boot. And that leaves a bit of room for my foot to have just a little bit of movement when I put my foot down to change direction. And I complained about the same thing on the GX1, so I had really hoped that they would have fixed that on the GX2.
But despite those grievances, I do think that the GX2 and the Phantom Luna 2 are a lot better than the Phantom Luna 1. But are they also better than the GX1?
I said in my Phantom Luna review that if you took the Cyclone tooling and slapped it on a GX, we would be talking about a serious boot. And to be fair to Nike, that's exactly what they did, isn't it? And the GX2 and Luna 2s, they just do many things right. They are super comfortable, they feel great, are really sticky on the ball, they're lighter than the first generations, they have a solid tooling, and they are actually much better and more balanced on AG. So what's not to like? Huge upgrade, right? Well, I just feel that maybe it's the changes to the upper, but somehow I just lack that magic from the first generation. Maybe it's that holy trinity of that very snug but still super soft and extremely grippy upper that just had a bit more character for me. So while I like them, I think I'm gonna stay with my GX DF. Rest in peace, brother. But with that said, I think the twos here do a really good job. As I said, they do many things right. So while I don't necessarily see them as an actual upgrade or necessarily a downgrade, it's more of a sidestep that sticks with the same DNA but just does things slightly different. And then I guess it's up to you to figure out if you like them enough to go and get a pair, which, by the way, you can do in the link to Unisport right over there. But not, of course, before you tell me what you think of the GX2 in the comment section right down below. And, of course, make sure that you subscribe to the channel with the notifications on. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.